specialization. University education curriculum need to be restructured from the present community-based to problem-based learning. It is thus proposed that industrial attachments need to be offered at second year of study, for it is key in the development of skills and competencies. Universities must make a deliberate effort to reach out to industries rather than expect industries to reach out to them. It is commendable that some universities have already embraced open and distant education and learning, which is a step in the right direction. Many agencies, such as the Commission for University Education, should assist universities in carrying out curriculum changes and sensitize all universities through training, review of programs, and capacity building for program reviewers. There is need for stakeholders in the Ministry of Education to embrace high level of proactiveness in making the highlighted resolutions a reality by, for instance, a proposal to explore the causes of education industry linkage absent in Kenya. University education has a role in developing a national character amongst our university students. This is indeed a big lesson we can learn from the Finnish. In the TVET and the post-training skills development group, they organized their presentation in three major topics. The key milestones was the first one, and on the key milestones, this is what came out: some polytechnics of industry advisory boards, which help generate curriculum in line with industry needs. And an example was Kisumu National Polytechnic. There was also development of national skills policy to coordinate skills development and linkage, which has been done. That was from post-training. The coordination of establishment of Office of Careers in the universities, TVET's basic institutions to link career guidance to the industry, and also establishment of the Kenya Post-Training Institute, which is in the process. On the reform agenda, this is what came out: the need for a common policy direction for both private and public institutions, need for a structured engagement between institutions and industry, and standardized learner training duration, e.g. proper and clear difference in the ratio of long-term and short-term courses. There is creation of consultative forums between industries and institutions for need-based training, and training of institutional managers is necessary for management of competencies. On curriculum training, this is what came out: needed to ensure graduate trainees have skills as well as pedagogy. Retooling and reskilling trainers for modern world education challenges. Enrollment is increasing, hence needs to balance quality and quantity among institutional managers. Need to build capacities for master craft persons who train apprentices, and establishing of National Skills Council to link training to the industry. And lastly, harmonization of qualifications by the Kenya National Qualifications Authority with the Kenya National Examination Council, which at times conflict. The basic education breakaway discussion, the following are the key issues that came out. Number one is needs assessment by KICD was done in 2016. They developed curriculum designed for PP1 and PP2, grade 1 to 6, and approved and is being implemented. A task force led by Douglas Odhiambo on session paper on the session paper of 2010 was formed. There was development of curriculum design for grade 7 and 8, which was approved by academic committees, production of curricular materials, development of BCEF policy, and then grade 3 school-based assessment, establishment of state department for curriculum reforms and implementation, which is coordinating the curriculum reforms, construction of CBC classrooms in secondary schools, training of secondary school teachers and principals on junior secondary school rollout, infrastructure development, distribution of course books in primary schools as grade 1 to 6, development of curriculum design for teacher education approved and implemented, training of trainer in CBC, which is ongoing, and piloting on e-assessment teacher education policy by Ministry of Education. Those are some of the milestones that were highlighted in the basic education, and there are some challenges: lack of instructional material for DBTE or upgrade course books, inadequate training of teachers and facilitators, inadequate training of teacher educators in some special learning areas, inadequate digital connectivity, lack of cooperation from stakeholders, and low enrollment of teacher trainees. That's in the teacher training colleges. The reform agenda proposed for: number 1, reforms in education was guided by changes in societal needs, and this was informed by the needs assessment by KS in 2006. These global trends in education guided by UNESCO and protocol on establishment of East Africa Community. All those were taken into consideration during the reforms. Some of the reforms that came out is the structure of the education system from 844 to 2633, and PP1 and PP2 became part of the basic education. In the teacher education, continuous training of teachers, professional development is a milestone. The P1 certificate has been replaced with a diploma certificate. Then there is direct aid in early grade, and indigenous language introduced as a new learning area. And lastly, in governance, this is how the curriculum is managed through an organization framework involving all organs and actors in education. The Department of Implementation of Curriculum Reform was established to coordinate, oversee, and monitor implementation of CBC in a collaboration with the education stakeholders. Advisory role to the implementation of CBC is at the institutional level. Thank you. I will stop there. Those are the main highlights that came from that group, and in total that's the main highlight for yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Continue clapping until I tell you to stop. Continue. Some of you, I'm writing names. Thank you very much. We are now joined by the guest who is joining us virtually, Mr. Guy Harrison, who is representing the Ambassador, European Union. If you are able to hear us, please greet us and introduce yourself, and then you can just start your presentation. Is some magic happening somewhere?
Good morning to you. Sorry, a slight technical hitch.
All right.
Very pleased to be with you this morning.
Guy, can you hear us? Go ahead.
So I can hear you very well. I'm waiting for you to go ahead, and we can then proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Guy Harrison. I'm head of the political and press section of the European Union delegation to Kenya, calling in. But on a global program relating to exchange possibilities for Kenyan students, but also exchange opportunities for academics and capacity building programs for higher education institutions in Kenya, which are in partnership with other African Kenyan institutions, but also with European universities. So a multilateral cooperation with various funds. And I'm hoping that you can see a slide. Is that the case? Can you just confirm that you can see the slide? If not, then let me know. Okay, so fantastic. Thank you. This is my colleague, Ms. Beatrice Honga, who's joined me on the call today, who is responsible for the slides. I don't want to take a lot of your time. What I want to focus on is on a program called Erasmus+. It is the world's largest exchange program for students and also for academics. Not often much heard about, but in fact a global program, which within European Union there's an internal component which has existed for over 30 years and has had a lot of success in ensuring mobility for students and academics within the European Union. But for a number of years now, we've also sought to prioritize interaction institutions in the globe, around the globe, and with the European Union. So Erasmus Plus, as the slide tells you, is in a nutshell a program to support education, training, youth, and sport. It fosters EU, but also EU international cooperation, and I think that's the part that interests you. And the current program is running from 2021 to 2027, and it builds on the previous experiences with this program and actually adds further features. It's building up and enhancing. With every program, we enhance the facilities and possibilities that are there. So as you can see, the coverage is global. Everything in yellow, so non-EU countries are countries that can take part, and you can see Kenya, of course, is part of that. This is what we refer to as partner countries, non-associated third countries, but the distinction doesn't so much need to. But of course, also with European Union universities as well. So maybe we go to the next slide. So there are opportunities for higher education institutions from non-associated third countries, so like Kenya, in areas such as international credit mobility, joint masters, design measures to actually create master's programs, specific specialized master's programs in any field.
Recording in progress.
Any field that you may wish to create an Erasmus, a master's scholarship with exchanges between European universities and Kenyan universities. Very importantly also, of course, capacity building for higher education. I'll come to that a little further down. And something which we call Jean Monnet activities. Fine, thank you. So international aspect, of course, but in reality there is a very broad spectrum of possibilities. So you can have higher education mobility for students, but also for academics and administrative staff from universities. And as far as universities, academic level is concerned, it can be at any level, so bachelor's, master's, and PhD, and in any subject or academic discipline. So it would concern basically all of you around the table in terms of your background and discipline. And there are various types of programs which I'll cover, but there are also it supports traineeships for students and training for staff. And these traineeships are from 2 to 12 months. But as we'll see later, there are also programs that are longer lasting. And we have something called blended mobility for 5 to 30 days with a virtual component, which means you can also follow and of course the grants to cover travel and living costs are fully covered. So just to make this very clear for the students, for Kenyan students, for instance, that this year, for instance, went to Europe, there are about 20 of them, not only is, of course, the tuition paid for and covered for, but also the living cost and allowances. There's a living allowance, quite a generous one. I think it's around 1,000 euros per student. The travel to and from Europe is covered. So essentially all major costs are covered, and students, as well as, of course, academic staff can travel between the European Union countries. In most cases, the program doesn't send a student or academic staff just to one country, but often to two. So one might find oneself, for a semester or half a year in Sweden, and the next semester in Spain, or one semester in So we have now more on the specifics of the various programs. We have some integrated masters courses. So there, in this case, you need to have at least 2 EU member states involved, not a problem, and the Kenyan country, the Kenyan higher education institutions. So it's a consortium of 3+ higher education institutions, and basically. The idea here is to create a master's program which needs to last for at least 6 academic years and covering at least 4 editions of the master program. So you can actually, this is what I was talking about, creating a master's program within your field. And there are different formula within that, of course, but normally institutions from all around the world can submit. So any Kenyan higher education institution is very welcome to look at this more closely, see if they wish to set up a Erasmus Mundus joint masters program in any field and cooperate with the European Union institutions in that way. We also have, this is a little bit taking it a little further, what we call Erasmus Mundus design measures. So it's a support measure to design higher education study programs at master level. So again, it involves 3 partners and it's a fixed duration of 15 months. So it's let's say support to the development stage of the master's program, which then I mentioned Kenya in this case. It can also be other countries. And the idea here is the 3 types of main projects. One is fostering access to cooperation in higher education, so a program of 2 years to 3 years, which are smaller scope projects focused on universities. And here the priority is to newcomers to the program, and you see there's a fund of around, for each project, of around 200 to 400,000 euros. And then we have partnerships for transformation in higher education, again 2 to 3 years, where the scale focusing on innovation in university business and governance. So here we're looking at 400 to 800,000 euros. And finally, we also have a major program focusing on structural reform projects, where for 3 to 4 years, which is on policy reforms. And of course, it involves then also very much your Ministry of Education. And here we're looking at the typical project funds of between 800,000 and €1 million. So these would be for an exchange of expertise between the support directly for capacity building within your institution, but also some component of exchange of expertise with European universities, who would then also very much welcome learning from your experiences here in Kenya. Next slide. Or more, focusing on a specific area of cooperation. That would be one option, and then the other option is multi-country projects. In this case, you would need 2 countries, so it would be maybe Kenya and Tanzania as an example, and 2 European countries, so maybe, I don't know, France and Germany, and then you can have also multiple partners, so it could be, 2 Tanzanian institutions, 3 Kenyan institutions, or any such combination, and again, with funding support and exchange of expertise. Then we have finally a subject in an elected political role, but who drove European integration in its own stage of education process at this stage, which you can read up in detail, and it's easy to remember when you've seen it yourself on paper. This presentation is available to you. It's a public document. I'm very happy to share it. And we would also, if you have further questions in Kenya, myself and my colleague, Mrs. Beatrice Hongo, who's on this call with me, and we will, of course, give you further information, further clarifications, in particular also on capacity building in Brussels based on global criteria. So there's, let's say, an evaluation done in comparison with other countries. I have to say, though, from my 3 years here in Kenya, I can tell you that I think Kenya higher education institutions, Kenyan students, Kenyan academic staff have very high chances of success given the high level of very high education standards that are here, both in country and from returning Kenyans who've been working in the academic field prior. I mean, it's a very highly skilled society, Kenya. So, you in trying to do these programs, starting from postgraduate study for students, all the to academic exchanges in any field. I have to underline, it really is open to anybody. What we want to see is greater uptake. So far, we've had reasonably good uptake, but we would like for it to be much higher. Just to give you a reference, for instance, when it comes to Erasmus Plus postgraduate students, so Kenyans who after their undergraduate studies choose to go on an Erasmus Plus program to Europe for a year or 2, then in Ethiopia we have on average something like 140, 150 candidates or successful candidates each year. In Kenya we're 20. Whilst I'm aware that Ethiopia is a bit larger population-wise, given the high academic standards here, we would want to see much greater participation. The ones that I referred to with the academic exchanges, the administrative exchanges, the capacity building, and so forth. So I've in these 10 to 15 minutes have skimmed very quickly on the surface of this. This is meant to be an appetizer for you, not necessarily the full in-depth explanation of everything that's on offer, but an appetizer to hopefully encourage your students to apply, but also you with your research institutions, with your higher education institutions, to look into this in greater depth, see whether this is something you would like to pursue. We hope very much that it is, and to then also apply from the level of your institutions, maybe also involving your ministry for the more advanced capacity building, structural reform policies. We have been in touch with your Ministry of Education, with the Principal Secretary, Honourable Mr. Encourage you to pursue this even further. We are open, and as I said, it's a very generous package financially for all levels, from student up to the academic cooperation between higher education institutions. I'm very happy to ask questions if there are any at this stage. But first and foremost, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity today to do this brief advertising, if I can call it that, for this program, for which I hope there'll be uptake. And just to say also that Finland, I know, who is very much present and active in this conference as a co-participant and host, of course, is one of the beneficiary countries also in the European Union. You can look into cooperation opportunities with Finnish institutions. Kenyan students can also look into postgraduate studies in Finland. So just to say, it's all connected, and the different aspects can dovetail with each other. Thank you very much for your attention. Asante sana, and over to the Master of Ceremony for any next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Before you log off, we want to clap for you. Please look at us. We are very happy for that presentation. Continue. We will get in touch with you through our secretariat. Those of us who have any questions, please, you can pass them over to the secretariats. Then this can be sent to Harrison. Otherwise, we should be able to get in touch with you in due course. Thank you very much. So we now need to move on to the next.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. We are very happy to assist. We want. We're speaking. Mobility and human, people-to-people exchanges between the European Union and Kenya, and I think this is the exemplary example, exemplary model of mobility that we can offer in the higher education field. We're bringing.
Get more microphones.
Yes, good. I feel really that I'm privileged to be here in this conference and hear your views and comments on education globally in this beautiful country, and also compare the ideas that we Finnish partners we present to you here. Sciences, universities in different positions as the lecturer, researcher, head of research development, specialist in research competence, and now education development specialist. So I have seen during these years that university has changed a lot in Finland, and when we have this morning this theme, innovation and research in education. So innovation, if I think back to 10 years, innovation was more discussed in natural sciences, technical fields, and not so much in social sciences and education. But nowadays, innovation is understood more broadly. So when we think about this concept, innovation, so it is something new. And of course, that if it is something new, we should also know what is then old or what is something current. And that is something that we need also research for. I would like to make one like, if I have a little bit time, some kind of activity. So I was listening to some sound. I heard that there was also some other kind of sound. And it became louder. I was then already convinced that it is raining. And then I was even more convinced when it started like this. Thank you. Yes, was this innovation, like activity? I copied this from my colleague, and I think that he has copied it from someone else. But so innovation, it is understood often as a product, but then it is also like research method, innovative research method, or teaching method, or some processes, and so it is then in that way very broad issue to discuss about. Yesterday when I was listening, you made comments that why we haven't reached those goals that we have already. We have competence-based understanding of competence-based curriculum and learning, but so why the goals they have not been reached. If there wasn't one answer, so then you would have known it already. But so I emphasize that research is, of course, one key tool to find these answers. And when I think research in education, I haven't done my homework enough well, so I don't know research in education, educational research about Kenya, but I will do that when I go home. I will study, do some homework. But so I'm thinking that how much do you have research at working places, research on teachers' views and identity, the culture, that culture of organizations, it has a lot of impact on the practices. So do you have research, and what kind of research you have on that? And then, because universities, they are the main actors in doing research, so do you have also research on universities, higher education, and the practices in universities? All this information and knowledge that is gathered in these researches, of course they are a big resource to make educational reformation, and also I would encourage you to also plan research also now on these reforms processes that you are planning and are already ongoing. Also I was thinking the practices in research in education earlier in Finland also, it was quite individual, and in technical fields it has been more like group working already long time. But so in education in Finland we have now much more research groups and with different themes, and that is also like a learning environment for young students, for doctoral students, and by that also encourage people to do, for instance, team working. Then the third issue that I had in my mind is the research methods. I know that policymakers, they like to have numbers, and it is important to get like figures and data, big data, but what is the role of qualitative research? Interview research, and then observations and case studies that also bring up very important detail about practices in school. Also how the children's or young people's voices, they are seen in this current research that you are doing. Thank you. These are my first words, and I will continue later a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Pusa. You can speak from there if you so wish. Well, wherever.
It's up to you to decide.
Anywhere.
Okay, thank you very much, and very good morning for you all, ladies and gentlemen. My colleague, Dr. Virve here, gave a very good presentation on the research side, and because I'm not a researcher, I'm not going to touch that subject very detailed, but I will take a brief look, some words from the management and leadership side related to the innovation and research. Because I'm not, as I said, not a researcher, I'm not into research, I'm not trained as a researcher, but my job as a director of the services at our university is to make the things happen, to make the things possible for the researchers and experts that they can do their work. But what I'd like to say, a couple of words concerning the innovation itself. I can fully agree with Dr. Virve that when she said that 10-15 years ago there was a lots of discussion on innovation in Finland, and I have to admit that I was a little bit bored of that discussion, because very seldom in the beginning it was not said what we are actually talking about when we are talking about innovation. There was a lot of so-called hype around it. But luckily nowadays it's changed, and as Virve here very nicely put it. It's much more clearer now what we are talking about. But what I'd like to emphasize also is that we should not forget the role of the students in creating the innovation and their part in innovation. And one thing that is very much, let's say, appreciated and emphasized in our education is the entrepreneurship. Developing the entrepreneurial mindset for the students, so that, for example, in our in university, and I believe in all universities, applied science, as well as this vocational education training, is to train the teachers, also to train the students, to give them possibility that they will have entrepreneurial skills, innovation skills in their studies, not in the means that they should all be entrepreneurs, but they have an entrepreneurial mindset of doing things. They have the tools, if they have an innovation, how to go forward with that. And again, one very important thing that partly what Dr. Virve here said is that when doing the research and when doing the projects for our partners and for industry, is that we can show the impact what we have done, and there the research has a very remarkable role. But then what I said in the beginning, my role is to make the things happen, to enable that our experts, the researchers and developers, they can do their work. My task is to support in them. And when we as directors and leaders have managed to create the circumstances so that the experts can concentrate their expert work, then we can also demand results for them. And that this we also should keep in mind. So thank you very much, and I wish you a very nice day today.
Thank you. Daktari?
Thanks very much for the opportunity to share a little bit about innovation and research in Kenya. I deliberately, in my short presentation, focused more on the innovation narrative and how it links within the context of higher education and research institutions. My name is Tony Mwanza. I currently serve as the CEO of Kenya National Innovation Agency. Some of us may know about it. It's a relatively young institution that was set with a mandate of developing the national innovation system and catalyzing the commercialization of research outputs. Now, I can't see the presentation here, so I will rely on what you do here. So, as I mentioned, I'm kind of leaning more towards the innovation narrative. On my next slide, this is what we wake up to do on a day-to-day basis, is to try and develop the national innovation system that then catalyzes ideas to market. What's the source of ideas? There would be probably research outputs. There would be ideas of students that could possibly find their way into market. There could be indigenous knowledge. There could be ideas from the general public, and so on and so forth. When I joined about September 2020, I was pretty much alone in that organization. Almost 2 years down the road, now we are over 40, and most of these systems and programs are taking off pretty well. Our interventions are categorized into about 3. And I think this is important because I've had an opportunity to visit a number of institutions and we've started working on certain things. Our interventions would either be national, and in national context, this is where we look at policies, practices, standard operating procedures, guidelines, and so on and so forth. And then at institutional level, we focus more on strengthening the commercial or innovation capacities of those institutions. We've started more funding to support more and more institutions. Then you'll see at the institutional level you have issues like policies, you have strategies. For example, end of this year we'll be supporting 4 institutions to develop. And then thirdly, we have interventions around individuals, and this is where capacity building comes in. We run an innovation academy, and we do quite exposure in different levels of issues like design thinking, user-centered design, IP policy development, IP exploitation, and so on and so forth. If you were to make an assessment of what our priorities are, you would think commercialization startups. Those are the things that will stand out most. Of course, for you to build a startup, you need funding, you're going to need partnerships, you're going to need some policy atmosphere and so on and so forth, about policies, skills, agreements, joint venture, and so on and so forth. But these two basically stand out in most of the work that we do and projects to do into the future. Now, we've learned that it's going to take a lot of partnership to me, but over the last 2 years or so, we've built a number of partnerships. And these partnerships that I'm putting here are largely more private sector or international or regional oriented based on the kind of work they do. And they provide support in many ways based on what we are aligned in, whether it is funding or human capacity or skills or reports. They help us to support data collection and so on and so forth. And I remember we had a discussion here yesterday around partnerships, and for me this is probably one of the areas that I found most valuable, and I do relate with the Vice Chancellor Daystar that probably 40% of my time